feels good. Come to the fire, ladies.
I'm not cold.
Now, Mr. Hale, before we start moving things about, would you please tell Mr. Henderson here just what it is you saw when you came in here yesterday morning?
By the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday?
Yes, everything's the same. When they dropped below zero last night, I thought I'd better send Frank out and start a fire for us this morning. No use in getting pneumonia with a big case on, but I told him not to touch anything except the stove, and you know Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday.
Yesterday. When I sent Frank down for that man who went crazy at the Morris Center, I had my hands full yesterday, I want you to know. But I knew that you could get back from Omaha today, so I figured as long as I took and looked at everything.
Well, Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you got to the house yesterday morning.
Harry and I started to town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place, and as I got here, I said, I want to see if I can't talk John Wright into going in with me on a party telephone. I talked to Wright about it once before, but he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked for was peace and quiet. I guess you know about how much he talked himself. But I thought if I came to the house and talked about it before his wife, though I said to Harry, I don't know that what his wife wanted made much difference to John.
Well, let's talk about that later, Mr. Hale. Just tell now, I do want to talk about that, but tell now just what happened when you got to the house.
I didn't hear or see anything. I knocked at the door, and still all was quiet inside. I knocked again, and I thought I heard someone say, come in. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet. But I opened the door, this door, and there in that rocker sat Mrs. Wright.
What was she doing?
She was rocking back and forth. She had her apron in her hand and was kind of cleaning it.
How did she look?
Well, she looked queer.
Queer? How do you mean queer?
Well, like she didn't know what she was going to do next and kind of done up.
How did she seem to feel about you coming?
Why, she didn't seem to mind one way or the other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, how do, Mrs. Wright? It's cold, ain't it? And she said, is it? And went on kind of pleading at her apron. Well, I was surprised she didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, I want to see John. And she laughed. I guess you'd call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, can't I see John? No, said she. Kind of dull-like. Ain't he home, says I. Yes, says she. He's home. Then why can't I see him? I asked out of patience. Because he's dead, says she. Dead, says I? She just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. Why, where is he, says I, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs like that. Well, I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from here to there, and then I said, why, what did he die of? He died of a rope around his neck, says she, and just went on pleading at her apron. Well, I went out and called Harry. I thought I might need help. We went upstairs, and there he was lying.
Yeah, let's go into that later. I'd rather have you talk about that when we're upstairs. We can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story.
Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. It looked... But Harry went up to him and said, no, he's dead all right, and we better not touch anything. So we went back downstairs. She was still sitting that same way. Has anyone been notified, I asked. No, says she, unconcerned. Mrs. Wright, who did this? Said Harry. He said it businesslike, and she stopped pleading at her apron. I don't know, says she. You don't know, says Harry. No, says she. Weren't you sleeping in the bed with him, says Harry. Yes, says she, but I was on the inside. Someone slips a rope around his neck and strangles him, and you didn't wake up, says Harry. No, says she, after him. Well, we must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she said, "I sleep sound." Harry was going to go on asking her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story first to the coroner or the sheriff. So Harry went as fast as he could to River's place where there's a telephone.
But what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew you had gone to the coroner?
She moved from that chair to this one over here and just sat there with her hands held together looking down. I got a feeling I ought to make some conversation, so I said I'd come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone. And at that she starts to laugh. And then she stops and looks at me, scared. I don't know, maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say that it was. Soon Harry got back, then Dr. Lloyd came, and you, Mr. Peters, so I guess that's all I know that you don't.
Well, let's go upstairs first, and then up to the barn and around there. Now, you're convinced there was nothing important here? Nothing that would point to any motive?
Nothing but kitchen things.
Oh, here's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit. It did freeze. She worried that that would happen after it turned so cold last night. She said the fire would go out and her jars would break.
Can you beat the women? Held for murder and worrying about her preserves.
Well, I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying over trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the lake? Dirty towels? Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
But there's a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
To be sure. And yet I know there are some Dixon County farmhouses that do not have such dirty towels.
Well, those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they might be.
Ah, loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends, too?
Well, I've not seen much of her of late years. Oh, I've not been in this house. Oh, it's more than a year.
And why was that? You didn't like her?
I liked her all well enough. Farmers' wives have their hands full, Mr. Henderson. And then...
Yes.
Well, it never seemed a very cheerful place.
No. No, it's not cheerful. I shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know as Wright had either.
You mean they didn't get on well?
No, I don't mean anything. But a place wouldn't be any cheerfuler for John Wright's being in it.
I'd like to talk more of that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now.
I suppose anything Mrs. Peters will do will be all right. She was to take in some clothes for her and a few little things. We were in such a rush yesterday. And,
yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters. And keep an eye out for anything that might be of use to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
I sure would hate to have men coming into my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Duty's all right, But I guess that deputy sheriff that came out to make the fire might have got some of that on. Oh, I wish I'd thought of that sooner. It seems mean to talk about her for not having things slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry.
And she had bread sent.
She was going to put that in there. Oh. It seems a shame about her fruit, but I wonder if it's all gone. Oh, I think there's some here that's all right, Mrs. Peters. Oh, yes, here. Oh, this is cherries, too. But I declare, I believe that's the only one. Oh, she'll feel awful bad after all her hard work in the hot weather. Well, I remember the afternoon I put up my cherries last summer.
Well, I must get her things from the front hall closet. You coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You can help me carry them. Oh, my, it's cold in there.
Well, Wright was close. Well, I think that's why she kept so much to herself. She didn't even belong to the Ladies' Aid. Oh, I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part. And then you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. Oh, she used to wear pretty clothes and be lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls, singing in the choir. But that was 30 years ago. This all he was to take in?
She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, but there's not much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. Perhaps to make her feel more natural. She said they was on the top shelf of this cabinet. Yes. Here it is. And her little shawl that always hung behind the door. Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale.
do you think she did it?
I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did. Asking for an apron and her little shawl and worrying about her fruit.
This is where I found it.
Hey, George, I think there's something here you should take a look at.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson gets awful sarcastic in a speech, and he'll make fun of her saying she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake when they was slipping the rope under his neck.
Oh, it's strange. It must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it's such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that.
But that's just what Mr. Hale says. There was a gun in the house. He says that's what he can't understand.
Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed for the case was a motive, something that would show anger or sudden feeling.
Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. Oh, it was white to here.
Oh, hey, can you give me a hand with this?
Oh, I wonder how they're finding things upstairs. Oh, I hope she had it a little more read up there. It seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here, trying to get her own house to turn against her.
But, Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
Well, I suppose it is. You better loosen your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
Oh. She was piecing a quilt.
Oh, look at the pattern. Oh, pretty, isn't it? Well, I wonder if she was gonna quilt it or just knot it.
They're wondering if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
Now, Frank's fire didn't do too much up there, did it? Well, let's go out to the barn and get that cleared up.
I don't see as there's anything so strange about our wanting to take up our time with little things while we're waiting for them to get the evidence. I don't see as it's anything to laugh about.
Of course, they got awful important things on their minds.
Mrs. Peters, here, look at this one. This is the one she was working on. And look at the sewing. All the rest of it has been so nice and even. And look at this, it's all over the place. Why, it looks as if she didn't know what she was about.
Miss Hale, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm just pulling out a stitch or two that's not so very good. You know, bad sewing always made me fidgety.
I don't think we ought to touch things.
Oh, I'm just going to finish up this end. Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Miss Hale.
what do you suppose she was so nervous about?
I don't know. I don't know if she was nervous. I sometimes sew awful queer when I'm just tired. Well, I suppose I should get these things wrapped up. They may be through sooner than we think. I wonder if I could find a paper and string.
Oh, in that cabinet, maybe. Huh?
There's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale?
Why, I don't know whether she did or not. I've not been here in so long. Well, there was a man around last summer selling canaries cheap, but I don't know if she took one. Maybe she did. You know, she used to sing real pretty herself.
Seems funny to think of a bird here. But she must have had one, or why would she have a cage? Wonder what happened to it.
Well, I suppose the cat got it.
No, she didn't have a cat. She had that feeling people get about cats being afraid of them. My cat got in the room after they brought her to our house yesterday, and she got real upset and asked me to take it out.
Oh, well, my sister Bessie was like that. Queer, ain't it?
Look at this door. It's broke. One hinge is pulled apart.
Well, I suppose someone must have been rough with it.
Yes, I see.
I wish if they was going to be finding evidence, they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
But I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would be awful lonesome for me sitting here alone.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I wish I had.
Of course, you're awful busy, Mrs. Hale, with your house and your children.
But I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place, and it always was. Oh, I wish I had come to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
You mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Somehow we just don't see how it is with other folks until something happens.
Well, not having any children makes for less work, but it makes for a quiet house. Ride out to work all day and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
No, not to know him. I've seen him in town. They say he was a good man.
A good man, yes. Oh, he didn't drink, and he kept his word as well as most, I guess. And he paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Oh, just to pass the time of day with him? Ooh, it's like a raw wind that gets to the bone. You know, I should think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose went with it?
I don't know, unless it got sick and died.
You're not from around here, are you? You didn't know her?
Not till they brought her yesterday.
Oh, come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself. You know, real pretty and sweet, but kind of timid and fluttery. Oh, How she did change. Tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind.
Mrs. Hale, it's a real nice idea. I don't suppose there could be any objection to it, could there? What should I take? You suppose her patches aren't here or things?
Oh, well, here's some red, and I expect sewing things are in here. Oh, wow. Look at the pretty box. Well, it looks as if something someone would give you. I bet her scissors are in here. What? Mrs. Peters, there's something wrapped in this piece of silk.
That isn't her scissors.
Oh, Mrs. Peters,
It's the bird.
but Mrs. Peters, look at it. Look at its neck. It's all other side, too.
Somebody wrung its neck.
Well, ladies, have you decided if she was going to quilt it or knot it?
We think she was going to knot it.
Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Has the bird flown?
We think the cat got it.
Is there a cat?
Not anymore. They're superstitious, you know. They leave.
No sign of anyone having come from the outside. Their own rope. Let's go up again and go over it piece by piece. It would have to be someone that knew just the schedule they kept in the way that
Oh, she liked the bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box.
When I was a girl, my kitten, there was a boy who took a hatchet, and before my eyes, before I could get there, if they hadn't held me back, I would have hurt him.
I wonder how it would seem never to have had any children. No, Wright wouldn't like the bird, a thing that sang. She used to sing, and he killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
Well, I knew John Wright.
Mrs. Hill, it was an awful thing that happened in this house that night. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him.
His neck choked the life out of him.
We don't know who killed him. We don't know.
If there had been years and years of nothing, and then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful still, after the bird was still.
I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota, and my first baby died, after he was 2 years old, and we with no other then.
Well, how soon do you suppose they'll be through getting the evidence?
I know what stillness is. Mrs. Hale, the law must punish crime.
I wish you'd seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress with blue ribbons and stood up there in the choir and sang. I wish I had come to see her. Oh, that was the crime. That was the crime. And who's going to punish that?
You mustn't take on.
But I might have known she needed help. I know how things can be for women. Oh, I tell you, Mrs. Peters, it's queer. We live close together, but we live far apart. And we all go through the same things. It's all just a different kind of the same thing. You know, if I was you, I wouldn't tell her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right. And take this in with you to prove it to her. She may not know whether it was broke or not.
It's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they just laugh? Getting all stirred up over a little thing like a dead canary. As if it could have anything to do with... Wouldn't they laugh?
Oh, maybe they would. And maybe they wouldn't.
No, Peters, it's all perfectly clear, except a reason for doing it. But you know juries when it comes to women. If there were only some definite thing, something to show, something to make a story about it, a thing that would connect up with this strange way of doing it.
Well, I got the team around. Pretty cold out here.
I'm gonna stay here for a while by myself. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything again. I am not convinced we can't do better.
Do you want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in?
No. I suppose they're not very dangerous things the ladies have picked out. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters?
Not just that way.
Married to the law. Oh, yeah. Oh, George, I think we ought to take a look at the windows.
Oh, the windows.
We'll be right out, Mr. Hale.
Well, at least we found out that she wasn't going to quilt it. She was going to, what is it you call it, ladies?
We call it, not it. Mr. Henderson?